Name of the game for the Red Raiders, and they have done just that and find themselves in the Sweet 16 for the third time in 4 tournaments. We're going to break down how they did it coming up on today's Locked On Texas Tech.
Are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Texas Tech, a member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. I'm Ryan Mainville. I cover Texas Tech for the Dallas Morning News. I'm joined by Emery Lida, a longtime Texas Tech analyst, writer, and podcaster. We are recording this on a Sunday night, fresh after the Texas Tech 59-53 victory over Notre Dame. We're going to be breaking down everything that happened in that game and taking a look at what needs to improve before the Red Raiders play Duke. This episode of Locked On Texas Tech is brought to you by StatHero. StatHero is reshaping the way that you play fantasy sports. Dozens of house-based games to play daily. No sharks, no funky props, just your skill versus the lineups you choose. Sign up today at stathero.com/lockedon. Emery, I've got the flu right now. I've got about a 101 degree fever. Been riding pretty consistently over the last 3 days, and I don't think I felt sicker than I did the last 8 minutes of the Texas Tech Notre Dame game. I mean, just what an absolute ride to witness and to cover. It was ugly, but the Red Raiders, man, survive in advance. It's that time of year.
First off, glad you're back tonight. I know that the flu is a pain in the ass to deal with, and I hope that you get better soon. But man, it was like trying to eat nails watching the last 8 minutes of that game. Like, I have genuinely never felt so much pain watching an NCAA tournament team that really, like, this game felt like no matter what Tech did offensively, it just did not work. It didn't matter if you were trying to play through the post, whether you were trying to play from deep, whether you were trying to get out in transition, just nothing was working. And so for Tech, I mean, it just came down to pure tenacity. I don't know how they were able to do it. I did not think this win was going to happen. I felt like at any moment Notre Dame was just going to hit a three to put the game into that 6 to 7 point range, and it would be out of reach because this offense, I did not have faith in them being able to score 6 points, period. And thankfully it happened. Thankfully Tech never reached that point where they were down more than 4, I believe. And I mean, it's just resiliency. I mean, this game was not one that I ever want to watch back again. It's not going to be one that I'm going to be remembering in the next couple of years. Hopefully there's a lot more games that we can remember from this year than the absolutely just dogfight that this one was. But they found a way. That's what matters. At the end of the day, it's another Sweet 16 appearance. And, I mean, that's all. That's what people remember from this one, not the agonizing 20 minutes of basketball that we watched in the second half.
Yeah, and so I think we were left in a really interesting space at the end of the first half. At least I know I was. Texas Tech went into the break with a 1-point lead, 26-25. Nothing was working offensively, as you mentioned. They were kind of revolving around Bryson Williams, but it didn't feel, and Kevin Obanor, forgive me for excluding his name there. He deserves every mention possible for his performance in this game, but it really felt like Texas Tech was in one of those spots where they could have made a halftime adjustment and just ran away with the game. Like, their defense it wasn't perfect, but they were playing pretty good. I mean, Notre Dame, their greatest strength is kicking the ball out to the perimeter, as we saw in the second half. And Texas Tech really limited that in the first half. I mean, you were forcing some crazy difficult shots in the first half from Notre Dame. Their leading score was like 1 of 9 from the field at halftime, and so you were doing a really good job at forcing them into difficult shots. And although I was expecting a little bit of a halftime adjustment for things to kind of sway in Texas Tech's favor, it stayed the exact type of game that it was in the first half. And even in the second half, I think Notre Dame outplayed Texas Tech in the second half, although the box score suggests otherwise. But absolutely insane. Texas Tech has another 7-minute field goal drought. They had the Kevin McCullough breakaway dunk. That was their last field goal in the the final 7 minutes and 15 seconds of the game. I don't know how Texas Tech has managed to get away with that twice now. They did it against Kansas State. They've done it now. It's cost some games against TCU and Oklahoma State. But, man, it's tonight was definitely a much different game than the 97, 95 points that Texas Tech put up against Montana State. Obviously a very different Notre Dame team, but I think we saw kind of what happens whenever shooters get open for opposing teams, especially against a team that's as dangerous from the perimeter as Notre Dame is. And you, of course, have to give the Fighting Irish credit there. I mean, they're the 8th best three-point efficiency team in the country, and you were playing with fire a little bit in that second half, and you let them get some very, very good shots.
I actually think the defense there's about a 4 or 5 minute stretch in the middle of the second half where I felt like Tech allowed some really good looks off of dribble penetration, and Notre Dame was getting really good looks in the perimeter, and they did knock down a couple in that one. The highlight being, I think there was 2 looks that they got off of pin down screens that were wide open that Notre Dame was able to hit. I think it was a good one that hit them. But really, I feel like for the most part, you did about as well of a job communicating against a team like Notre Dame as you've done pretty much all year. And you allowed some open threes, but I felt like that was going to happen against this good of an offense when it comes to spacing with the style of play that Tech likes to play, kind of overhelping at times. And certainly I feel like you saw it wasn't easy. Like when you're giving up that dribble penetration in Notre Dame, that was the one thing where when things were going well for them, they were able to get inside the lane. If you notice, a lot of the offense down the stretch, Notre Dame just simply could not get any sort of dribble penetration, and they weren't getting guys good looks off the ball. Tech was smothering the pure off-ball movement. So for me, the key there was once Tech's on-ball defense got a little bit better and sort of shortened up some of those driving lanes, and really some of it comes down to just sheer luck too. Like Notre Dame had some good looks that they missed off the ball. And then I also think that in a weird way, Bryson Williams having that shot where I think it was Wesley hit one over top of him in a mid-range shot where they switched 1 through 5 and got that switch. I think Notre Dame kind of made a mistake and kept trying to go back to that offense. And we've seen when you do that against Tech, it can be a dissonance because teams try to switch that. And when you have Santos-Silva on the floor and you have that switch, it just does not work. And so in a way, that was maybe a little bit of a fatal flaw. But for me, I mean, the defensive attention that Tech had in this game, I felt like was for the most part really good. The first half especially was some of the best defense we've seen from Tech this entire season. The second half, I feel like you got a little bit lucky at times, and offensively was just a disaster. But you survived, and that's really, if we're looking at the tournament, I mean, there's a lot to analyze from this, and we'll get into that later in terms of what Tech can improve. But to just get out of this game, get out of a game against a team that shot 60% from 3 against Alabama and really looked explosive at times against Rutgers, to be able to get out of this game with a victory and not have to face that offense again feels like a win. And it feels like something that you can really take as you can't take for granted, because even if it was ugly, you still got it done.
Story of the game for me, this Notre Dame team, really, really good at protecting the basketball. Texas Tech has had their struggles with that over the course of this season. Red Raiders had 8 turnovers tonight to Notre Dame's 11. That's the fewest that Texas Tech has had in a game this season since they played Omaha, which was their best offensive game of the season, and obviously a much different caliber of opponent. I don't see how you win this game without that being the case.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Notre Dame has not been particularly great at forcing turnovers all year, and this is just kind of the style of defense they play. They run a lot of zone. Their on-ball defenders are not particularly aggressive. They're not a team that fouls a lot. That's something that we saw in this game. It was hard for Tech to get to the line unless they were just outright just abusing them in the paint. And I mean, for the most part, Notre Dame played the style of defense that I feel like should have allowed for more offensive production from Tech. Certainly it wasn't one of those games where they were smothering on or off the ball. It was just things just were not going well. And I mean, that's something that you can look for as things to improve on against Duke and going forward. But at the same time, like just being able to get through this game, I think the one key thing for me was getting onto the offensive glass. Kevin Obanor, I believe, had 6 offensive boards in this game. And really, in a lot of ways, that saved an atrocious shooting performance on the inside for you. You only went 17 of 44 on 2-point looks, and it had probably, I believe it was your lowest effective field goal percentage in really this entire season outside of the Tennessee game in Madison Square Garden, which was really the last time when you had the style of just glad it's over with type of game. So it feels nice to win. That's all there is to it.
You mentioned Obanor. I want to talk about him as well as a couple of other individual Red Raiders coming up in our next segment. I love March Madness and bracket contests, but I can't remember the last time I actually went deep and won any money. I'm hedging my bets this year with StatHero. StatHero's NCAA single pick'ems pits the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Start focusing on the players you know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, long odds, or funky props. StatHero gives you the advantage, resulting in their gamers winning 4 times more often. Why? Because StatHero eliminates the mystery about who or what you are going up against. StatHero is the easiest and fastest way to get your sports action fix. The simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. This is what daily fantasy was meant to be, StatHero. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not a resolution because I actually enjoy eating Built Bar products. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. They're low in calorie, high in protein. Replace your candy bars with these, they are better. Go to Built.com and scroll down the macros chart, you'll be blown away. They're high in protein, low in calorie, high in fiber, and low carb. Go to Built.com today to get your hands on some of your own. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. Just a reminder that we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you have not subscribed to our channel, I kindly ask that you do so now. Talking Notre Dame, Texas Tech, Raiders win 59-53 to advance to the Sweet 16. Got to talk about Kevin Obanor and his performance in this game. Man, he was just beyond value for the Red Raiders tonight. Finished the game with 15 points and 15 boards. Joins Armando Bacot, your guy, Oscar Shibue, and Chet Holmgren as the only guys to have 15 and 15 in a game, in an NCAA tournament game this season. And so, obviously, a very impressive performance by him. He was everywhere. Had 7 offensive rebounds. Notre Dame as a team had 8 tonight. Man, you had all the talk about March Kevin Obanor this entire season. Felt like it was kind of easy to get frustrated with just his inconsistency and streakiness at times this season. And here he is again, man, helping a team get to the Sweet 16 with just an unbelievable night.
And let me tell you, this was not the March Kevin Obanor that I feel like a lot of people might have seen. This wasn't some 45% shooting from deep, KO, hitting pick and pop shots. This was quite possibly the most gritty performance by a Tech big we've seen in the NCAA tournament during this most recent era of Tech basketball. I mean, you're talking about a guy that ended up with 7 offensive boards. He had 15 total rebounds. Like, for a guy like Obanor to get 15 and 15 in a system in Tech, which really has not prioritized individual rebounders in any game, like that's not something you rarely see a Tech player get more than 10, maybe 11 boards at the most. Obanor ended up with 15, and a lot of those offensive boards were just sheer willpower, like him being able to overpower smaller defenders, come up with a ball in a lot of traffic. And I think the tenacity on the inside is something that, I'm going to be honest, I did not see as his major strength coming into Tech, but it single-handedly got him through some cold stretches earlier in the season. I remember early on in Big 12 play, he was going through a ridiculously cold stretch from 3. We were shooting under 26%. And yet his 2-point efficiency and his offensive rebounding kept him being one of the most efficient players in the Big 12. And we're seeing again. He only went 1 of 4 from 3 tonight. I thought he had 1 shot that was ill-advised and then 3 decent shots, and 2 of them just didn't go in. And yet you look at it, and he was still, for me, the player of the game for Tech. And I did not anticipate that being the case. I still think for Tech to reach their maximum potential, he has to be knocking down his shots. But for him to carve out a role like that and just absolutely will Tech to this win, it's impressive. It's not something I would have anticipated, and it feels so nice to have a big like Obanor, because even on a night where Bryson Williams had his moments, he still had some inefficiencies. His 3-point shot wasn't going down, which is kind of a trend for the entire Tech roster. And so Obanor being able to get those offensive boards, continue to give Tech second chance opportunities, it was crucial in this game. And what a time for Obanor to step up. We knew that we were going to need him, and This March, it's Kevin Obanor time.
Yeah, I mean, a remarkable performance. One that is honestly probably historic. Like, I was looking at the play index earlier, and there's only like 38 guys that have had a 15 and 15 in the tournament since 2010. I mean, it's something that's really hard to do. But he's not my player of the game.
Marcus Santos-Silva?
Easily, man. It's crazy because you look at his box score, and he's got 4 points, 5 boards, and a turnover. 2 blocks, but not exactly the most eye-popping numbers on this Texas Tech box score. I mean, you got Bryson Williams with 14. You got Kevin McCullough with 14. But, man, Texas Tech does not win this game without Marcus Santos-Silva. I thought he had a remarkable stretch to close the game on the defensive end. His block was just absolutely phenomenal. His ability to hang with guards this entire season has been nothing short of extraordinary. And for him to do that at the biggest point of the game was incredible. And to come away with a block, to get the board underneath the basket and then get fouled, you're just kind of thinking to yourself, oh no. Like, of course, the 46.5 free throw shooter is going to the line, and he knocks him down both, right-handed. I mean, it's a stunning performance. It's why you have veteran guys like him on your team, and I could not be more complimentary of his performance to close out this game. He had 2 possessions in the first half. I think he had 1 blatant turnover, and then one that I don't think was credited to him, but it probably should have. And I thought, man, he is going to have a rough night. But he just completely rebounded in that second half, and the way that he closed this game, man, I've got to give him Player of the Game awards. I just think that he earned it.
I'm going to be the first to admit that after how the Arkansas game went last year, kind of the inverse where Santos-Silva got played off of the court in a sense, I was pretty harsh on him. I felt like there was no way that a team that relied on him to be the 5 and the team defense was going to be able to reach their maximum potential. And I think we saw that in the Arkansas game. But this game, and really this entire season, you have seen just a different animal in the defensive end. I mean, there's a reason that a lot of the defensive metrics have Santos-Silva as your best defensive player on the roster from a team defense standpoint, because he is just so good at switching. I think that is what changed the game for Tech. And I think I mentioned this in the first segment kind of in passing, was when Notre Dame started going to those 1 through 5 switches, they could not get anything on Santos-Silva. And not only that, you have the highlight individual play, being able to get the block. That was certainly spectacular, getting the rebound, getting fouled, and then knocking down 2 free throws. I mean, it was poetic. There's not much more to say about it, because Santos-Silva is someone that has never been a good free throw shooter. This year in particular, he's been struggling. He's been going from left hand to right hand, which you almost never see from anyone at any time in a season. And to do that in the middle of the season and get basically 2 free throws, just 2 opportunities the entire night to knock him down. You didn't get any sort of warm-up. It's the end of the game. You've been playing a really hard-fought game, and to knock both of them down, not even touch the rim on either of them, it's ridiculous. It's incredible. I mean, I fully support him being the player of the game. I think there's no way Tech wins this game without him switching defensively and really stepping up, making those big plays. And, I mean, him and Obanor weren't the only 2 reasons that Tech won. Certainly, you had some good performances elsewhere and guys that stepped up in certain moments. But for me, just seeing what those 2 guys brought to the table in somewhat unconventional ways. I mean, with Santos-Silva obviously had the switching, which is normal for him, but then for him to knock down 2 free throws and really be what broke that game open broke the game open in a sense for you, that was critical. And then in Obanor's case, being able to get so many offensive boards and really just be a presence on the inside. Like, I did not expect either of those guys to have the impact in the ways that they did coming into this game, but for them to come up huge in the clutch, those are the types of players you need to move on, because you're going to have games. I mean, you're going to have games when guys like TJ Shannon, like Kevin McCullough, like Bryson Williams aren't having good games, and you're going to need guys to step up in sometimes in unconventional ways.
Yeah, a very big night from Texas Tech's front court. Obviously, Obanor and Santos-Silva with very key performances, and I've always been a big believer that talent is what wins you basketball games. I think that's pretty clear. But in March, man, there is there is no debating that there is a clear correlation between age and winning. I mean, just having experienced, seasoned guys is so good for your program, and to have these two seniors, I think, has been very, very big through 2 games so far, and I'm sure that it'll continue to be big as Texas Tech heads to the Sweet 16 in San Francisco to play Duke. We're going to take a look at the Blue Devils and what Texas Tech needs to improve on from this game coming up after a word from BetOnline. It's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season, and it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. It's Sunday night as we are recording this. We watched Notre Dame and Texas Tech play a rock fight, but Emery, I'm sure that you also caught most of the Michigan State-Duke game. Obviously, Duke is a team that has drawn a lot of eyes, as they always do this season, but obviously with it being Coach K's final year on the Blue Devils sideline, Duke has been getting a lot of attention, it feels like, this year, and I know that a lot of Red Raider fans since Selection Sunday have been kind of positively reacting to Duke being the potential road to winning your bracket, to winning your region. And this is a Duke team that has a lot of talent on its sideline and a lot of experience, a lot of really good, just a lot of really good players, man. But Emery, you're the ACC guy. What have you seen from Duke over the course of the season, and just what potentially could be some issues or some strengths for them as they play Texas Tech?
Well, let's start with this. I think there's a strong case for Duke being the most athletic team in the country. And if they're not the most athletic team in the country, they're certainly the most athletic team left in the tournament after Auburn just got knocked out. And I mean, this Duke team, you look at the raw talent on the roster, and there's really not that many people out there in the country that can compete. I mean, you've got Paulo Banchero, who is easily, in my opinion, the best prospect. And I know that's a hot take, but I have him over Holmgren. I have him over Jabari Smith. I think it's not particularly close. You've got AJ Griffin, who really kind of was struggling a little bit to start the season and just picked it up as the season went on, kind of found a role in that team. Coach K gave him more minutes as the season progressed, and he really turned into a lethal shooter off the ball. And again, that's something that's going to present an issue for Tech. We've seen guys like that have had really nice games. I think a lot of his production has come off the ball this season, but he's certainly a talent that you're going to have to watch out for. And then, I mean, you want to look at some versatility. They've got that in spades. You've got, obviously, Wendell Moore. You've got Trevor Keels. And then you've got Mark Williams on the inside, who's one of the best shot blockers in the nation. But I think more importantly, he's got good instincts. He's good at avoiding foul trouble a lot of times. And his free throw ability is something that keeps him on the court. So that's sort of a rundown on the key players for them. But just looking at their style of play, I mean, this is a team that if you want to look at weaknesses that match up with what Tech does well, they're not a team that has a single really reliable ball handler. They're running Wendell Moore as the point guard a lot of the time. And it's similar in a lot of ways to what Tech has done with McCullough, where Wendell Moore is a guy that has played at times throughout his high school and AAU career as a primary ball handler, but he's never been that guy. And certainly in college, he was never asked to be that guy. So we've seen some rough stretches in that sense with him as a ball handler. We've seen that from Jeremy Roach, who at times has been out of control for them. He's certainly kind of been more under control and better as of late, but he's prone to those sorts of turnovers. You've got Trevor Keels, who's been kind of more of an off-ball guy for them. And then the rest of the roster are guys that can at times struggle to create for others. So ball handling is an issue. Shooting, they've really only got Griffin as their most consistent shooter. Obviously, Moore, Keels, Roach, Banchero, all of them can hit them on their day, but they're not an elite shooting team like a Notre Dame. And defensively, I think the one thing that they have is when they're playing with Williams and Banchero, they can be prone to having issues on switches. And we saw it in the UNC game. We saw it against Virginia Tech. And we saw it to some degree against Michigan State. And I do think that's something that Tech can explore in the pick and roll matchup. And so there's a lot of weaknesses in this roster that I feel like you can take advantage of if you're Tech. But obviously, this is a really talented Duke team. In my opinion, the most athletic team in the country, one that has the potential that if everything's clicking for them, they're going to be almost impossible to beat. But thankfully, they haven't really had that throughout the season outside of just a couple of games, one of which coming in Chapel Hill and one of which coming against Gonzaga early on in the season.
And it's kind of crazy when you consider their personnel and the fact that they are truly lacking a true point guard, because their assist to turnover ratio is phenomenal. I mean, they're like 1.6 assist to turnover ratio on the season. It's ridiculous.
The style of play, I think, has a lot to do with that because they have so much open court basketball that it really allows them to kind of rack up the assists. Because if you look at when they get into half court sets, a lot of their half court stuff is more ISO driven, and it's not really turnover heavy just because they don't really play with a ton of ball movement in general. It's something we've mentioned with Tech, where as the ball moves more, you're going to have more opportunity for potential turnover. But I mean, I think that the transition allows them to kind of inflate the assist numbers, and they're not a bad ball handling team. Like, we're talking about this on like nitpicking. Like, if we're looking at this Duke roster, you would say they're still above average in just about every single thing you look at. But if you're comparing potential weaknesses for a Sweet 16 team, for a team that's a top 10 team in the nation, I would say their ball handling has to be one of them.
Yeah, fifth in the country in total assist. Obviously, a lot of those coming in transition. So much of what they do in the half court kind of revolves around Banchero. Obviously, Roach has kind of been one of the emerging guys for them in the tournament, but a very talented Duke team. I think what you've got to do is, if you're Texas Tech, obviously, we've got a whole week to preview the Blue Devils, so we're not going to flesh every single detail out here, but I do think what Texas Tech needs to do is just try and find a way to force turnovers. Don't let them get out in transition easily. It's been a weakness for Texas Tech this season, getting back after made baskets, especially, which is like a really, really random thing that this team has struggled with, but it's shown up on tape time and time again. I think they've got to limit that. Other than that, man, I don't know if I have a ton to apply from this Notre Dame game that I think is easily translatable against Duke, just because two very, very different teams, as you mentioned, two very, very different styles of offense, two very, very different calibers of rosters. I mean, Duke is loaded with talent. I think they've got like 6 RSCI top 100 guys on the roster. Obviously, Banchero, I don't see how anybody would pick Banchero lower than 1. I mean, the dude is just an incredible talent. Obviously, Wendell Moore is seasoned at this point in his career, and he's still really talented. Mark Williams, as you mentioned, has an uncanny ability to block shots without drawing contact. Trevor Keels has been good. Just a really good Duke team. And we've got all week to kind of dig into some of the holes that I know that Red Raider Nation has been mentioning. But Emery, curious as we close out here, anything you saw against Notre Dame tonight that you think Texas Tech could put into the scouting report before the Duke game?
I think some of it's just self-scouting and looking at some of the deficiencies that Duke is going to take advantage of. I mean, if Tech is going to help off as much as they do in the post, and Banchero is having a good facilitating game, I think that Duke can absolutely take advantage in the same way Notre Dame did, in terms of just getting those open perimeter shots from driving help and from post help. And certainly, obviously, you don't think that that's going to be Duke's main source of offense, but with a guy like Adrian Griffin on the outside, it's something that they can really sort of exploit. And then I would also say on the offensive end, like, if you give Duke if you try to pack the paint like you did in the second half against Duke, it's not going to work, because Mark Williams is miles better as a rim protector than anything else that Notre Dame has, and really anything that you've seen in the last few games, whether it be in the Big 12, outside of Cisse for Oklahoma State. You're really talking about a lot of guys that haven't been the greatest rim protectors, or if they are, they're prone to getting into foul trouble. So like Cisse for Oklahoma State, obviously you faced Chet earlier in the season, so it's not like you haven't faced those guys, but it's an adjustment you're going to have to make offensively, because just purely posting up Bryson Williams isn't going to cut it. And neither is just trying to basically play bully ball with your guards. So I think that offensively, you have to look at ways to better the ball movement and kind of get more efficient looks and sort of spread Duke out in a way, because I think that's going to be one of the trends that you didn't really see against Notre Dame. But it's one of those things where if you don't do it against Duke, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So just self-scouting would be what I would say. And I would also say that if you're looking for positive things to look for from this Notre Dame game, I feel like in the first half you did see a lot of ball screen movement up top and a lot of trying to draw the big or Atkinson out from the paint, and you saw a couple of the top of the key 3-point attempts. I know it's something you've seen all season. I'm kind of grasping at positive straws here, but if you're just looking at that above the break three, I do think that's going to be a weapon for you against Duke, and I'll explain more in detail as to why that is in one of our episodes going forward, because I certainly think that there's more nuance to it. But I'd say just trying to look for that sort of set is going to be one of the things that you can do that's really going to be important coming into this game.
And that's another instance of, I think, Texas Tech scouting well, because Notre Dame has been pretty awful defending the pick and roll this season. And so I think that's something that maybe Texas Tech will try to do a little bit more efficiently against Duke. NCAA just announced that Texas Tech and Duke will play the Thursday late game after the 6 p.m. I believe it's Arkansas Gonzaga tip. So it'll be pretty late, but we've got all week to bring you our coverage on Duke, and then of course we will be recording late that night, our favorite. Hopefully I still don't have the flu. That would be less than ideal. But thank you all for tuning in to our round of 32 recap. Texas Tech back in the Sweet 16. We're going to make the most of it, and we hope that you will come alongside us for the journey. Before Texas Tech and Duke tip, you can follow me on Twitter at rmainvillelbk. You can follow Emery at eraser41. I'm sure we'll be giving plenty of our thoughts on the Bird app. You can also follow the official Locked On Texas Tech Twitter page at LockedOnTTU for announcements whenever we drop a new episode. Until then, thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for joining, and we will see you tomorrow.